Hey, it's Jeff Nelson, and today we're going to be talking about something a lot of people struggle with, and that is how to lose weight in a way that is not only effective, but also sustainable and healthy long-term. And to help us dig into this, I brought in someone uniquely qualified, Dr. Peter Rogers. If you've seen any of our past videos, you know Dr. Rogers isn't just another plant-based doctor. He's a double-board certified physician with a deep understanding of metabolism, physiology, and the science of weight regulation. He's helped many people improve their health using evidence-based, nutrition-first approaches without fads, gimmicks, or guru magic. He's going to walk us through what actually works when it comes to losing weight and keeping it off without wrecking your metabolism or losing your mind or following a liquid diet for the rest of your life. So let's dive in. Peter, you ready to roll?
Yep.
Here we go. Let's add your slides.
Okay, so can you see it?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is Annette Larkins. She's 70 years old in this picture, and it's kind of like Dr. McDougall used to say, you can see the truth. Now, her husband owned a sort of a delicatessen butcher shop. She thought it was kind of disgusting, so she became a vegan. They live in Florida, so she was able to grow a lot of her own food, and she's aging fantastic. Whereas her poor husband, and she talks about this in her videos, you know, he's got all the standard Western diseases, and he looks like a typical 70-year-old, okay, not healthy. Whereas she looks like about a 40-year-old, okay? She looks fantastic. She's been called the most beautiful grandmother in the world, okay? And, you know, the typical thing you run into is all these people who are fat and sick, they look at the vegan and they say things like, where are you going to get your protein, okay? And you really don't need much protein. We talked about this before, but, you know, breast milk has only 5 or 6% of calories from protein at the most rapid phase of growth in life. Kempner was feeding people as low as like 3% of calories from protein. They're doing fine without even giving them supplements. It is thought when you start getting down around that low, you might need to give essential amino acid supplements or keto analogs and whatnot. That's like for kidney failure patients. But the point I'm saying is I've never seen a protein deficient patient. McDougall never seen a protein deficient patient. And Pritikin said the same thing. If you're eating, you know, just your own chosen plant-based diet, it's impossible to be too low in protein or calcium. You can forget about those things, okay, or omega-3s either. It's a non-issue. Okay, so here is a painting by Thomas Cole from The Voyage of Life. It's a series of 4 paintings from around 1840, really. And here's first the baby coming out of the birth canal, where there's mama, guardian angel, and everything is abundant and happy, and many of us were fortunate enough to have real happy childhoods. And here is youth, and the young man, he's looking at his dream of a future in the sky. Mama says bye-bye, and he's going down the river, and it looks like a straight path on up to utopia, and his dreams all come true. But if you look carefully at the drawing, there's a curve, goes around the bend, and as you head down around the bend, the water, all of a sudden, you head into the rapids. There's a lot of big rocks, okay? And that's life, okay? So here we are in middle age, and it's like, wow, life's a little tougher than I thought, you know? How are things at the job? How are things in the marriage? How's everything else going? So this poor guy, the oars have fallen out of the boat. He's going over the rapids and the rocks with no oars. You know, guardian angel's looking pretty far away at the moment. Well, don't worry. We're going to show you how to save yourself from most of the common health problems as best we can. Lovely painting here. So that was The Voyage of Life by Thomas Cole. Here's The Lifeline by Winslow Homer. All right. And so you find yourself middle-aged and older, and you're looking like the Mona Lisa, you know, kind of fat and not everything that you wanted to. And, you know, how can you become more like The Birth of Venus by Sandro Botticelli? And, you know, nobody's ever going to be 18 years old again, but there's a lot we can do. The closest thing there is to a fountain of youth is all this health stuff about healthy diet and the lifestyle habits that go with what we're talking about. So number one killer of Americans is processed food, okay? Which means, you know, all the fried food, all the high fat food, all the additives, you know, the MSG, MFG, high fructose corn syrup, and all this stuff. They're just making everybody fat and sick. One thing too, just to tell you, because a lot of people like to say it's genetics. Like a typical patient will say to me, oh, you know, doc, it's got to be genetic. It's got to be genetic because, you know, I got heart disease, had to go for open heart surgery, and I got diabetes, you know, all that stuff. But my sister has it, my brother has it. It's got to be genetic. We all got it. And I'm like, you know what? You all eat the same food, okay? You know, in a family, they don't just pass on genes. They pass on dietary habits. Okay, another thing too, you'll hear things like, oh, it's genetic. All the migration studies show stuff's not genetic, okay? And then the one thing I used to be taught when I was young is, oh, in blacks, their hypertension, it's just genetic. There's nothing you can do. They're salt sensitive because they come from a hotter climate. Yeah, right. Here's a paper from 1929 in the Lancet Journal. Author's name is Donison. He was an English physician, and they just checked the blood pressure on men, okay, on men, 1,800 consecutive admissions. And guess what? What percentage of the patients were hypertensive? If you took a bunch of adult men in the United States, black men, and checked their blood pressure when they were being admitted to the hospital, you probably have about 80% of them hypertensive. In Kenya, in 1929, where they ate a plant-based diet, zero, not a single patient was hypertensive. They also then had a group of men who were from Europe, like white men, and then the black African men around the age of 60. Let's say approximate ages, a little more, a little less than 60, and they measured their average blood pressure. For the European guys, it was 140 over 90, mildly hypertensive. For the Kenyan men, 105 over 67. And that's characteristic of a plant-based population. They still have the same blood pressure their whole life, from when they're, a kid, teenager, to when they're in their older years. So the point I'm saying is it's not genetic. The reason why there's a high incidence of hypertension in blacks in the USA is because they eat too much processed food, which is low in potassium, low in magnesium, high in sodium, lack of dietary fiber, all that stuff. Okay, here's an example population, a cautionary tale. These are the Nauru people. That's an island out in the Pacific Ocean near Australia. They were skinny and healthy back in 1914. And then the corporations came in and said, gee, we'd like to buy your topsoil from you, because the birds defecating on the soil left a lot of phosphate in there that they could use for phosphate fertilizers. And the people said, okay, they offered them, as an offer they couldn't refuse, so much money. Nauru actually became the richest country in the world for a little while because the corporations gave them so much money. But the consequence was, instead of growing food in their topsoil, they had to ship in processed food, and then they became the fattest people in the world. The average adult weighs 230 pounds. Diabetes off the charts. Okay, they sold their long-term future for a short-term deal. Not too wise. Okay, here's Bruce Lee. And one of the things you notice is all the extras are skinny. The only fat guy in a Bruce Lee movie would be Bolo, because he's taking steroids and probably eating a sumo wrestler diet. But, eating a primarily white rice-based diet, as Dr. McDougall used to say, 1 billion out of 1 billion rice eaters are skinny. Okay, they used to eat like 85% or more of their calories from white rice, which is only 1% of calories from fat. The lower the percentage of calories from fat, the skinnier the population. I lived in California for 4 years. I never saw a fat Asian. They all ate so much rice. I had a friend on the wrestling team. He would eat rice 3 times a day. It's like water. It's very easy to eat. Okay, Northern California, northern Mexico. Here is the Sierra Madre. Sierra means like a saw. Sierra Madre Mountains, Copper Canyon area. The Tarahumara live there. They used to be combined with the Pima population, but after the Mexican-American War, 1848, the Pima were absorbed into Arizona. They eat the SAD diet now. Because they ate the SAD diet, they're fat and sick. Because they kept their old ways, they're skinny. The Tarahumara means like fleet runner. They're famous, world famous for ultra marathons. A lot of American long distance runners have gone down there to train with them. They eat lots of corn, local greens. They also eat some beans. They eat some squash, for example. The Pima, they got all the Western diets, tons of gallbladder disease, gallstones, cholecystitis, and they get all the Western diseases, diabetes, all the surgeries that go with it, open heart surgery, appendicitis because of lack of dietary fiber, so you get dry stool on the right side of the colon, abdominal pressure syndrome, all the Dennis Burkitt stuff. Okay, here's the Tarahumara. It's like every guy in town can run 100 miles in 2 days. It's not like just the fast guy. All the guys can do it, okay? They don't have cars. Here's a paper on the Tarahumara. This guy, Connor, did a lot of research. He was actually friends with T. Colin Campbell. But, look at the things he says. They're eating corn and beans. Carbohydrates, about 75% of their calories. Let's see, what else does he say? Virtual absence of hypertension and obesity. Okay, they don't get elevated serum blood cholesterol as they get older. Okay, their calorie had as high as 12% of their calories from fat. They exercise a lot more than the modern American does. I like to keep fat lower than 10%, but they were exercising a ton. Okay, here's the Pima, just to see that they used to look good. The Pima used to be skinny. This looks like a college wrestling team, okay, back in the day when they ate the same as the Tarahumara. But, nowadays they eat the standard American diet and they're really fat. Okay, here's just another population to show you. It's always the same story. Eating the old-fashioned, largely plant-based diets, the people are skinny, energetic. It's like here's the Yanomamo in the Amazon jungle on the border of Brazil and Venezuela. And they're often in little internecine, tribal battles with the other local tribes. And despite all the stress that goes along with that, they're extraordinarily healthy in terms of their blood pressure. And they eat a very low sodium diet. Their sodium diet is so low that when you check their urine, you sometimes can't find any sodium in it at all. The kidney is good at saving sodium because it tends to be in short supply in the wild, so to speak. It's very good at excreting potassium because potassium tends to be abundant because when you eat plants, it's in the plant cells and you get tons of it. Okay, as Dr. McDougall had shown, Dr. McDougall had said, he said, starches unlock the door to good health for thousands of my patients. All long-term, large, healthy populations get most of their calories from starch. There are no exceptions. The Asians ate rice. The Okinawans ate sweet potatoes as well as their other foods. The Mayans and Aztecs were known as the people of the corn. The Incas of South America ate potatoes and quinoa. The Irish also ate a lot of potatoes. The ancient Egyptians ate wheat. So there it is. That's from Dr. McDougall's book, The Starch Solution. And that makes people healthy. And that's one of the greatest things Dr. McDougall figured out is you feed people a primarily starch-based diet, up to 90% of their calories from starch, 5% from fruits, 5% from veggies. They're skinny and they're healthy. What more do you want? And here's just showing you eat the low-fat vegan diet, you avoid all the common diseases. The Americans are high to moderate to high in all these diseases. The East Asian sort of Japan, Korea, China diet was actually reasonably good. A lot of white rice, and they ate a lot of vegetables, not that much fruit, but some fruit. What got them in trouble was they're smoking like chimneys and putting 12 to 14 grams of salt on their food. So they had a lot of hypertension from that. But their diet was pretty good, like especially old Okinawa. They added the sweet potatoes in there. The diet of people from India is actually not that good. You'll talk to a person from India, and they look relatively good. They tend to be relatively skinny. And I thought all my Indian friends were all healthy. But then I started talking to them as they got older, into middle age and older, and I found out they got a lot of disease. They got lots of diabetes, lots of coronary artery disease. And I wasn't sure what was going on because even a lot of their diabetics look skinny to me. And then I came to the conclusion it's from the oil because they ate lots and lots of fried food. They get some fat from the ghee, the butter, and the yogurt, but they eat tons of fried food, the ones I know, a lot of them. Not all of them, but the ones I know. And that's what they told me too. They think it is, and I think it is. And so they've got a lot of disease from that. Fried food is always bad. You never want fried food. You don't want any oil. I won't eat anything with oil in it. Okay, I went through my own fat phase when I was in my 30s. I was just working too much. I tried to do 2 fellowships simultaneously. I wrote a textbook of imaging guided surgery that year, had a baby at home with the wife. I was drinking 7 cups of coffee a day, and I got fat. I couldn't believe it. I said, oh my gosh, I'm just going to lose this real fast with willpower, exercise more, eat less. But I couldn't do it for 3 years gone by. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to be a fat person forever. And my wife was laughing at me. She's like, oh, well, that'll make my life easier. You're going to become impotent. And my whole family thought it was very funny. And they're all making fun of me. And I knew I have to. And my sister-in-law, I was kind of like being a little arrogant, not listening to her. She's trying to tell me to eat more of a plant-based diet. And she's like, well, okay, Mr. Doctor, if you're such a good doctor, then why are you so fat? And I'm like, oh my gosh, she's right. I got to figure out how to solve this. So this was, I don't know, like 25 years ago, I became very interested in nutrition at that point. I started reading everything. And also I learned about the McDougall starch-based diet, and that helped me to really turn the corner and get off the last 15 pounds. And this is me when I'm in my fat phase at 220 pounds, years after I got skinny. I was a star McDougall, actually featured over on his channel in 2007. And then I also moved to a house where I could exercise more, but changing the diet was the key thing. So I went from 220 all the way down to about 155. Now I'm about 165, but I'm in good shape at 165. Okay, here's another thing that makes people fat. In the processed foods, companies have a lot of money, and they run these taste testing research programs where they bring a bunch of persons from the public in, and they vary the amount of MSG. MFG is like really the same thing, manufactured free glutamate instead of monosodium glutamate. They vary the amount of salt, sodium, amount of fat, how much is fried, emulsifiers, what generates a mouthfeel, high fructose corn syrup, and they're looking for the bliss point. what makes people like it the most, be most likely to want to buy more and eat more. So they put a lot of research in trying to make people addicted to stuff. And what I'm saying here is like this painting of Ulysses and the Sirens by Herbert Draper. You need to learn how to avoid these sirens. Stay away from processed food. You know, it's like a prostitute. It turns out she's got HIV positive. Okay, you don't want to go there. Okay, here's MFG, manufactured free glutamate. To make MFG, all you do is you run chemical processing on a protein to break it into pieces. Like you can ultra pasteurize, that breaks it up into pieces. Put some enzymes to break apart some of these amino acid protein bonds. Extracts, like you'll often see when you see extract, think of that means increased glutamate, MSG, MFG in the food. Anyway, so you free up the individual glutamate molecules because these are amino acids that we have taste receptors for in our mouth and our pharynx and whatnot. And our ancestors worried about starvation. So for them to find a good protein source was valuable. For us, it's nowadays irrelevant. But back then it was. So we get reward neurotransmitters released in our brain. And the food companies take advantage of this. They load it up with glutamate. Our brain doesn't care if it's MSG or MFG. All it cares about is glutamate. And it causes a release of reward neurotransmitters that make us like the food. You can take a stale, lousy food, throw a bunch of glutamate on it, and we'll love the taste of it. But it has harmful effects, including potentially on the brain in a significant way. This lady wrote a real good book, Catherine Reed, PhD. She's got a good TED Talk as well about how this excess glutamate added to processed food caused autism in her daughter. And it was reversible because her daughter had a mild enough form of autism. When she got all the MSG, MFG out of the diet, it reversed her autism. The lady was a protein biochemist, so she knew enough about protein to figure out how to avoid it and what was involved. And so that's why her book is interesting. She was also interviewed on Chef AJ's show. It's worth watching. You might want to check that out. Okay, here is The Pleasure Trap, the famous book by Lisle and Alan Goldhamer. And there's some pretty interesting stuff in here. I'll show you a diagram of what they mean by the pleasure trap. But there's some interesting things in here. So here's Lisle speaking. And he says, Alan and I were highly motivated. For most people, it's difficult. It's rare for people to escape from the pleasure trap. In Stone Age villages of the past, most people never ate a single nut or a single bean. Modern processed foods have a drug-like effect on people. In the modern world, 99% of diet diseases are excess, they're not deficiency. Two most important things to become healthier: avoid animal foods and avoid processed foods. That's from Lisle. I got one other quote from Lisle down here below. He says, trying to talk to an unmotivated person into eating the vegan diet or fasting is like trying to do a frog march. You know, people don't do it unless they want to, and most don't. Only about 5% of people, he said, are likely to ever do it. Okay, here's some quotes from Alan Goldhamer. Eating low caloric density foods helps people to lose weight. Low caloric density. For the vast majority of people, if they eat a low-fat plant foods diet, they'll end up with a good body weight. That's all you got to do. It's kind of like if you want to be good at anything, the first step to being good at anything is find somebody who's already good at it and then imitate what they do and then try to learn from them and then start adding your own stuff. But let's say you want to be a painter. You're in the Italian Renaissance. You go study the great paintings of the great masters and you learn how to make a painting kind of similar to theirs, and then you go see a whole bunch of different ones and you like something, you're naturally good at something, and you eventually develop your own style. But if you want to be skinny, study skinny people. All these people all over the world, these populations where they eat low-fat, plant-based diets, they're skinny. So be like them and you'll become skinny too. And then you don't have to go through all this medication stuff or bariatric surgery stuff. Okay, a lot of people, he says, moderation never works for addicts. Yeah, you know, you don't tell an alcoholic you can drink on the weekends or a cigarette smoker you can smoke on the weekends. You got to quit smoking, okay? You know, some people thought they were following the diet, but they weren't. Yeah, a lot of times when a person's not losing the weight and I start talking to them a little closer, they're eating a lot of high-fat foods. You know, like, well, I'm taking omega-3s. I heard nuts and seeds and flax and soy were good for you. And they can't lose the weight. Okay, even Chef AJ, she said she couldn't lose the weight until she got rid of the nuts and the seeds from her diet because they're very high in fat, like 70 to 90% fat. The lower the percentage of calories from fat, the skinnier the population will be. As Dr. McDougall had said, the fat you eat is the fat you wear. And Dr. Goldhamer also says, just because one food is not as bad as another doesn't mean it's good. Just because olive oil is better than corn oil, it doesn't mean that it's a good idea to eat olive oil. Okay. All right, now here's the pleasure trap. So the idea of the pleasure trap is that if you compare the taste of a low-fat vegan food compared to one of these Bliss Point research hyper-palatable processed foods, there's sort of it's going to taste good, the Bliss Point processed food. And people get used to eating that stuff all the time. And if they were to eat that and then go back and eat some of this vegan food, it tastes blah. It tastes worse than average, okay? So they're like a junk food junkie, if you will. But one of the things they have noticed is that if a person fasts for a little while, it's almost like they reset their taste buds, and then they're happy to eat the low-fat vegan again. So that was one way to escape the pleasure trap, is have a brief fast before you then go to eating the low-fat plant foods. In the long run, though, this is what you're going to see. There's nothing ambiguous about it. The data, evidence, and clinical experience to support it is overwhelming, and the epidemiological evidence. Low-fat vegan diet, that's the best thing to make humans healthy. To lose weight fast. 1 billion rice eaters can't be wrong. Okay, let's see what else. Same thing with sweet potato eaters, potato eaters. Those are all 1% of calories from fat. The lowest fat bean is a lentil, only 3% of fat. A lot of fruits are also low in fat, but starches are better for satisfying hunger. But I see a lot of young fruit eaters that are pretty healthy and pretty thin. Okay, starches satisfy hunger better than other foods. They got a little more fiber. Starch is a polymer of glucose wrapped in fiber, basically. I'm going to show you a diagram of how that all works in just a little bit. Like I said, lentils are the skinniest bean, 3% of calories from fat. Black beans are about 4%. Garbanzos are about 13%. Soy is much higher. It's like 37%. Okay, Chef AJ has some good quotes about losing weight. She said, if it's in your house, it is in your mouth. Get all the junk food out of your house. Okay, Dr. McDougall usually recommends 90% of calories from starch, but for weight loss, he says it's good to eat 70% of calories from starch and 30% from veggies. He says you can even up that as much as 50, but he says don't ever go beyond 50% of your calories from veggies or you'll get sick. Because veggies are so low in caloric density. Avoid fruits, avoid sweets. He's not that big a fan of fruits. He thinks for weight loss, it's best to limit those to about 5% of your diet. It's better to eat your calories than to drink them, because when you eat your calories, your body has to take more effort. It'll stretch your stomach. It takes longer to digest them. You're less likely to get a rebound in hypoglycemia. I'm not that big a fan of blenders. I think they're so noisy. They hurt my ears. One second. I always will put this thing on, and if somebody's using the blender, I'm not a fan of them. I think you're going to high risk to go deaf. Okay, let's see what else. Avoid, added salt. You can put a little bit of salt on the outside of your food, but you don't want to be. I don't add any salt to my food, and I don't eat anything with more than one ingredient, because when there's a second ingredient, they can add MSG, MFG, other flavorants to it. Be careful about managing your stress, because if you're stressed out, you'll have high cortisol, which tends to lead to weight gain. Sleep deprivation elevates the same hormones of stress. Catecholamines, epinephrine, norepinephrine, and cortisol. Caffeine does the same thing. That's another good reason to quit caffeine. Once you're done with caffeine, you feel kind of a little bit lousy for a couple of days because you're addicted to it and you got these cravings for it. But once you get past that, you feel pretty good. The way to quit caffeine is to taper off of it, like 25% per day is how I did it, of each individual cup. I drank 2 cups per day for like 15 years. Avoid estrogenic chemicals. It's a fat storage hormone, so it tends to get you to gain weight. Filter your drinking water. At least have a carbon filter, because that'll remove estrogenics. I like to have a reverse osmosis even in my kitchen, and a whole house carbon filter. No beer. That can also contain a lot of estrogenic chemicals. Estrogens are fat storage hormones. They tend to promote weight gain, sort of like keep this weight on, save it. The baby might need it for energy. Estrogen levels go up during pregnancy. No oils, not one drop. And you don't want to be, half-ass on that, because people who go halfway on that, they just don't do that well. There's almost like to limit it to 1/4 of your old is an improvement, but you'll still quite often have problems. I've seen that in some of the patients who I've taken care of and tried to help, that they just don't fully turn the corner. Your body can, let's say, heal 2 steps per day. And if you're keeping up with your bad habit, you can only heal 1 step per day. And then, you go to a big party and you splurge and you knock yourself back for a week or more. It's just, why not just do it right? It's your body. It's your life. I would tell you, like, the other thing too is, typical patient will say to me, well, I have to give up ice cream. I love my ice cream. It's one of my few pleasures in life. I'd rather die than stop eating meat, all this type of silly stuff. And my attitude is, all I see all day long is train wrecks and disasters. So I'm sort of like, my attitude is, the proper attitude is this all I have to do is eat these low-fat plant foods, and I don't have to get these diseases, hypertension, diabetes, atherosclerosis, plug up all my arteries and become fat, sick, and stupid like all these people. I'll do it. I'll do it like Flounder in Animal House joining the fraternity. I'll do it. I'll do it. I'll do it. I mean, it's like one of the best deals you'll ever get in your life. I like the plant-based diet. I like being skinny. I like aging better than my friends and family and colleagues. Why wouldn't you want that? Okay. I recommend no nuts, including no coconuts, seeds, avocados, none of that stuff. It's way too high in fat. No soy, 37 to 40% of calories from fat, estrogenic, goitrogenic, glyphosate, get out of here. Flax, 58% fat, estrogenic, goitrogenic with cyanogenic, cyanide-like chemicals in it. Forget about it. Would never eat that stuff. Okay, here's another interesting paper. This is William Roberts, and he wrote the best paper ever written on coronary artery disease. It was his legacy paper, 50 years of studying the coronary arteries, looking at the epicardial coronary arteries of the heart. And one of the things he noticed is that the old idea of single vessel CAD, coronary artery disease, was a myth. Okay. By the way, I thought that abbreviation is kind of funny. CAD is coronary artery disease. Everybody uses that. And there's been a trend to change the old lower extremity atherosclerosis. Used to be abbreviated PVD, peripheral vascular disease, to PAD, peripheral arterial disease. Okay, that's for the legs, iliac arteries as well. But the reason why I think it's funny is I've noticed I got all these patients with brain arterial disease, and I go, what should we call that? Bad? And then what about the atherosclerosis, main cause of impotence to the Johnson? Your first glance would be call it DAD, but you should not call it DAD. That's a bad idea. I thought call it JAD, Johnson arterial disease, okay? For the eyes, we could call that VAD, visual arterial disease. For the ears, I said call it HAD, hearing arterial disease, okay? So I'm kind of playing, but there's truth in that. And what else am I getting at? There's an important message in this research of William Roberts. What he said was you never see a focal stenosis that would be fixable just with a stent or with a bypass. Coronary artery bypass graft, CABG, CABG, is to start the graft, let's say from the aorta, ascending aorta, and then plug in distal to the stenosis, the narrowing. He said it's never like that. It's always diffuse along the entire course of the coronary artery in similar severity. Diffuse. All this yellow stuff here is the atherosclerosis. So you could never just bypass it and be done. You could never just stent it and be done. It's always diffuse. The only way you can fix a diffuse problem is you can fix the diet or you can try with pills. But the pills don't work as well. If you get a total cholesterol 140 based on diet, you're in the zone. You're probably never going to have coronary artery disease problems. But if you get a 140, based on medications, it doesn't mean as much as it does from diet. Yes, the medications can have some predictive effect, but to achieve the excellent results with diet, you get more clinical benefit because you're fixing all kinds of problems in the background when you do it that way that you're not necessarily addressing. And a lot of these medications, they got secondary side effects, like a statin, okay? It's inhibiting coenzyme Q. And you've got metformin inhibiting complex 1. You got a little bit of, with the statins, increased risk of diabetes. So you're robbing Peter to pay Paul. You understand what I'm saying? You're fixing one problem, but creating a new one. And the net result is you don't improve as fast as you want. So what I'm trying to say here is unless you go low fat, plant-based, it's inevitable. You're going to get atherosclerosis and plug up your arteries. There's no way around it. I've been a doctor over 30 years. I did a fellowship at Harvard in vascular interventional disease. Okay. I've been studying this for decades. And I can tell you, I'm not aware of any other way to win the game. So, that's what you want. You want open arteries so your brain works and everything else, your heart, everything else. Okay. And here is the problem of what is called Buridan's ass. Okay. Buridan's mule. So what he put is food in 2 containers next to the mule, and the mule would kind of lean towards one, then towards the other, and it could never make up its mind. And that's also been called analysis paralysis. So a lot of people, they just can't make up their mind to do one particular diet or another. They had failed experiences with the South Beach diet, with the paleo, keto, carnivore, low carb stuff, and they just don't know what to do. So they stay sort of in this modified Mediterranean diet, sad diet business. And what I'm saying is, why not just try low fat vegan? Try it for 3 months. See what happens. Measure your blood pressure, measure, whatever lab test you want to measure, and your body weight, Saturday morning after voiding. Measure your weight just once a week, Saturday morning after voiding, and see what happens. Just give it a try for 3 months. You don't have to commit to it for life. A lot of people freak out when you commit to something for life, okay? Try that, and you will probably be surprised. Here's sort of the main diets. Nathan Pritikin has said the main way to divide diets is high fat or low fat. That's the most important distinguishing factor. Dr. McDougall had said the number 1 toxin in the Western diet is the excessive amount of fat. Okay, the rice diet of Walter Kempner is perhaps the most extreme and austere diet. Very, very low in fat and protein and sodium, but it worked wonders for improving people's health. The Spartan vegan diet that I tend to go by is also very low in fat, no added salt, 100% organic. Avoid all processed foods, caffeine, alcohol, etc., artificial sweeteners. Okay, there's a Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn diet, which is very similar to the McDougall diet, very similar to what the Jeff Nelson diet, okay? These are plant-based diets with no oils, okay, that are low in fat, all right? Then you have what I call the high-fat health vegans, which is really sort of like a vegan version of the Mediterranean diet, okay? And a lot of times they'll eat things like nuts, omega-3, algae, flax, chia, olive oil, avocado, soy, caffeine. I recommend avoiding all that stuff, and I actually recommend avoiding all these processed things like MSG, MFG. I'll never eat anything with more than one ingredient for that reason, okay? I sometimes teasingly call that the high-fat phony diet. Philosophic vegans, animal rights vegans, they don't really care about health so much, so they don't necessarily eat that healthy. A lot of times they don't, with a lot of high-fat foods. Some people are vegan for religious reasons, like some of the Seventh-day Adventists, so their health is pretty variable. It's going to depend also to what extent they minimize the processed food and the high-fat foods. You get the lacto-vegetarians, like skim milk alone, you can get your lipids under control, but you still have a high cancer risk. Skim milk will increase your risk of prostate cancer and potentially other cancers by activating mTOR. There's other reasons why you want to avoid it. Lacto-ovo vegetarians, we throw in eggs with the ovo, lacto-ovo pesco, adding fish. But the more you go down this path, the worse it gets. I jokingly call the Mediterranean diet the Antichrist diet, that it promises salvation. It's the most common thing recommended by conventional medicine, but it's a lousy diet. It almost doesn't forbid anything except processed food, but it's full of oils and meats, high-fat foods, and even alcohol. It's not a good diet. The SAD diet is a disaster. The low-carb, Atkins, paleo, keto, carnivore stuff is all nonsense. You can do well on any diet for just a couple of months. That's called the Hawthorne effect, meaning that if you closely study a population, they get a little more attention, their willpower is high in the initial phase, they can get initially promising results. But for example, the high fat gets them to fail the oral glucose tolerance test, meaning that they still have insulin resistance. Even if their blood sugar is not so bad, when you just check it at baseline, the insulin resistance is doing damage to their body that's ongoing, okay? Obesity theories. Here's some of the theories of obesity. Once refrigerators became available, people could store meat and more food and eat more, okay? Taste addiction, we talked about that, the bliss point stuff. Body weight set point. Your body has a set point, and that's why you can't lose weight by willpower. You're set, sort of like your hunger drive, to eat exactly the amount you eat of whatever diet you eat. So the only way you're going to change your set point is you have to change what you eat. Okay, you can tell that, like if you work in a place, and you've been there for a couple of decades, people all tend to be about the same size as they ever been. We all tend to have a set point. So you got to change the diet to change the set point. We talked about stress, elevation of cortisol, sleep deprivation, all that stuff goes with it. So avoid those things that stress you out unnecessarily. Caloric density, we'll talk more about that in a moment. Estrogenics. Estrogen is a fat storage hormone, and we're exposed to tons of these things. Okay, they've been called obesogens. They get the body to store fat. The baby might need it for energy. And there's lots of them. They're so common, it's not even funny. They're in all these plastics, and you want to minimize your use of personal care products. You really want to be a minimalist. I like to say it's good to be like Adam and Eve, but keep your indoor heating and plumbing. Like for a woman, you don't need these perfumes. The guy either thinks you're attractive or you're not. He doesn't need the perfume to make him like it. Like deodorant, I think, is totally stupid. You walk in the door and say, hey, how you doing? You don't sniff each other's armpit like a dog. By the time somebody's sniffing your armpit, they like you. A lot of these other things, these modern things, if it smells bad, it's bad for you. Vinyl shower curtains, if it smells bad, throw it out, okay? Vinyl flooring, not as bad, but make sure your water's filtered. You can get women's birth control pills in your water if it's not filtered, ethynyl estradiol. We talked about these foods, many of them being estrogenic, and the seafoods too. God, all the stuff I would avoid it. Skin creams, I don't like any of these skin creams. Like for sunscreen, I just go out in the sun for about half hour, and then go back inside. I don't sit at the beach all day with sunscreen because a lot of estrogenic chemicals in there. Light dissolves like in biochemistry. Your skin is largely lipid, and they're transdermally absorbed. Your skin's not water. I mean, if you swim out in the water, you don't quickly gain 10 pounds. Okay, so these are transdermally absorbed, and they can have estrogenic effects on you. A lot of detergents are estrogenic in their chemical structure. Dishwasher detergent, you don't need it if you don't cook with oil. Laundry detergent, you don't need it. I just run the cycle a little longer, a little hotter. So I've been doing that for decades. Works just fine. You don't even need shampoos. I found it made no difference in my hair. I don't have much hair, but the hair I have, it made no difference to use shampoo or not, so I just stopped using it. let's see, Anthony J. wrote a great book about estrogen generation. I'll show you that, about estrogenic chemicals. We talked about the Yamashita theory. He felt that was causing fat because he felt that you're not only damaging your pancreas, you're also causing damage in your brain to the arcuate nucleus, hunger center, and the hypothalamus, and that can lead to decreased ability to control your eating, was the conclusion of Tatsumori Yamashita, that Japanese neuroscientist guy. MSG can also potentially be toxic to the hypothalamus, it is thought. Epigenetics, there's a little bit of a genetic component that if mom was starved, you might be a little more prone to retaining fat on your body. And it's also been shown that we used to think you had a fixed number of fat cells, but there's some papers that said we can actually grow new fat cells. So once you're fat, you might be higher risk to become fat again. And I think my body is a little bit like that. After I got fat, I noticed that my body almost like wants to be fat. So I really got to watch my diet or I'll potentially gain weight. We talked about how the high fat causes insulin resistance. Anything that causes insulin resistance will tend to make you gain weight. It also ramps up SANS, sympathetic autonomic nervous system features, including higher cortisol and all the bad that goes with that. mTOR accelerates your aging. You don't want to run that rapid by eating animal foods. Animal foods all tend to be high in fat. Even a lean meat's like 25% fat. When I say low fat, I want to be like less than 10%. I don't like simple sugars, even though I know that's a hot topic, a sugar diet. They're really rough on your teeth. I reactivated a cavity when I tried that sugar diet recently. I was not happy with it. Plus, a lot of people are prone to rebound hypoglycemia, where your sugar goes down too low, your pancreas secretes too much insulin, and then you drive your sugar too low, your blood glucose too low, and you feel real lousy, and you'll often grab more simple sugars, and the process repeats itself, so your blood glucose curve is like a roller coaster. Not good. Starch, I'll show you a picture of it. It'll make more sense when I show you a picture of this. High-fat diet also, you end up with something called leptin resistance, meaning it's hard for you to turn off your hunger and you just keep on eating. We're not going to have time to go into all that, but okay, being sedentary increases your likelihood of becoming obese, but diet's much more important than exercise. All the good stuff's in plants. Okay, caloric density. Dr. McDougall has been talking about this for a long time. Here's the old Dr. McDougall weight loss book, Maximum Weight Loss, where he goes into a lot of these things. He knew what works. He knew the epidemiology. Chef AJ has also been teaching lots of people about how to lose weight for many years. Her book on how to lose weight, it's an excellent weight loss book. She goes through all the psychology of it. She was overweight when she was younger and how she kept making progress by improving her diet as she went along, including, avoiding the nuts and the seeds, eating lower caloric density. Oh, actually, let me go back to that a little bit here. So caloric densities, oil is the highest caloric density, like 9 calories per gram. You can put thousands of calories in your stomach. Meat and cheese are about 4 calories per gram. The nuts and seeds are real high too. They're about 6 calories per gram, real high caloric density. That's why I never eat that stuff. Meat and cheese are about 4 calories per gram. Same thing with sweets and simple sugars, end up being in that ballpark. So that's still pretty high caloric density. In comparison, the starches are about 1 calorie per gram because there's so much fiber. Okay, so a pure carbohydrate like the sugar is about 4 calories per gram, but with the starches, with all the fiber in there, there's only fiber in plant foods, none in animal foods, you end up about 1 calorie per gram. So you're going to stretch your stomach. That stretching in the stomach provides early satiety, early satisfaction of hunger. Then it takes time for the intestinal enzymes to peel the fiber away from the glucose. So you get a slow absorption of glucose and you stay in a relatively normal blood glucose for a prolonged amount of time with your hunger being satisfied. Now, veggies are even lower. They're like an order of magnitude lower, 0.1 calories per gram. So those really stretch your stomach. But the problem is they deliver so few calories that you'll end up not satisfying your hunger that well. You just can't do it on veggies alone. There's just not enough calories in there. Starch is the best way to go. And people can eat 90% of their calories from these starches. Okay, and they'll do real well. And fruits are about in the same ballpark. But fruits don't satisfy hunger quite as well as starches do. So here's sort of like some of the famous best diet books. Dr. McDougall, he knew what works. He's been writing about that for a long time. Chef AJ's got experience coaching many thousands of patients with really good results in her own personal experience. The Pleasure Trap goes through a lot of the psychology. Chef AJ goes through a lot of the psychology of overcoming addictions and eating issues. Okay. This is my book, Prevent and Reverse Obesity. Mine's a little bit different. I'm kind of autistic, so I don't say almost anything about psychology. Got a lot of jokes in there, a lot of estrogen chemistry, drawings of epidemiology, biochemistry, pathophysiology, toxicology. So it's a little more of a medical biochem type-ish book. But all these books will be helpful to you if you're interested in learning about weight loss. So here's what I was talking about with starch. It's a polymer glucose. So you got all this glucose wrapped in fiber, stretches the stomach, low caloric density, that's early satisfaction of hunger, goes through the small bowel, intestinal tract. Intestinal enzymes have to separate the glucose from the fiber, and it's gradually reabsorbed. All that fiber is good for your colon and your bowel health, so to speak, your good gut bacteria. This keeps your blood glucose curve relatively normal a prolonged amount of time. If you eat a simple sugar, it rises a little bit too fast. Pancreas overcompensates, releases too much insulin, drives it down fast. That's rebound hypoglycemia. Then you'll often grab another simple sugar and just repeat the process, end up with a roller coaster blood glucose curve. These are your typical starches: potatoes, sweet potatoes, rice, beans, peas, oatmeal, quinoa, wheat, barley, that sort of stuff. Here's a little more detail on the blood glucose curves. If you eat the fat first, the fat will cause insulin resistance because it gets inside the skeletal muscle first, more rapidly than the glucose does. And once you got insulin resistance, then the glucose from the carbohydrates or the sugars that follow will give you a prolonged elevated blood glucose. So that's insulin resistance. That's why there's a detrimental consequence of eating the fat, that it causes insulin resistance. This is just the same thing, okay? If you eat the fat first, you got insulin resistance, and that causes a prolonged hyperglycemia, postprandial hyperglycemia after eating. This is the Estrogeneration book by Anthony J. I've read a bunch of books on estrogen chemistry. This is the best one. It's very clever, entertaining, and funny. Now, this guy, he's kind of young, and he's a lipid biochemist, but he doesn't know that much about nutrition, because people sometimes say, how could you speak so highly of Anthony J when he doesn't really know nutrition that well? And yeah, he doesn't. But you know what? He's great on estrogen chemistry. He's great. It's the best book ever written on estrogen chemistry. I've read a lot of estrogen chemistry. It's a magnificent book. So it's worth it for that. So here is a cholesterol molecule, 4 rings, A, B, C, and D rings, okay? Hydroxyl group coming off the A ring. You can put 3 double bonds in here, then it becomes an aromatic ring, like has a pleasant smell. That's also called a benzene, and it has resonance stability. So it gives it a long shelf life. You put it, again, a hydroxyl group on there. It's called a phenol, the benzene ring with a hydroxyl group. And that has great antimicrobial properties. So you got good shelf life and you got good antimicrobial properties. That's a perfect preservative. So that's why so many preservatives will have this estrogen ring. And it's this estrogen ring of the phenol that binds with the estrogen receptor. So these chemicals are ubiquitous and they're never going to go away. A corporation can just change one little substituent on it and they're going to keep doing it. Now, this is another reason why you need to eat dietary fiber. When you eat dietary fiber, you get good gut bacteria. They don't cause any problems for you. The liver excretes excessive estrogen. We monitor our bodily estrogen levels, and when it's high, the liver will detoxify it. It'll add a glucuronic acid to it. That's called conjugation. Excrete it into the bile, makes it more water soluble in the bile. And then that goes into your intestinal tract, and then you defecate it out of your body. That's what normally happens. But the bad gut bacteria from a low-fiber diet, they'll have this enzyme called glucuronidase, and they'll deconjugate the estrogen. And once they cleave off the glucuronic acid, now the estrogen is reabsorbed into the body. So you'll have high estrogen levels in the body. And I know women who've told me that every single woman in their family had to get a hysterectomy before the age of 35 years because of fibroids. And then I talked to them more closely. Yeah, they eat a lot of meat. Yeah, they drink tap water. They don't filter it. They have a very low dietary fiber. They also eat a lot of processed food. So that's why they're getting fibroids, because their estrogen levels are through the roof, activating the fibroids to grow in their uterus. And then they end up getting hysterectomy. And then once they get the hysterectomy, they no longer menstruate. Because they don't menstruate, then their hematocrit goes up, their blood viscosity goes up. They end up hypertensive, getting a lot of atherosclerosis. Okay. All right, now you want to make sure you filter your water, because I jokingly said if you're drinking 8 cups of tap water per day, it's like 8 cups of estrogen, increasing your likelihood of gaining weight, increasing your likelihood of having breast cancer. So you definitely want to filter that water. And your bottled water is not that great of a substitute because you're drinking the plastic that's estrogenic, from the bottled water. Here is the Fountain of Youth. Okay, this is a painting by Lucas Cranach. He's a famous German painter. He used to paint Martin Luther, the Fountain of Youth. The old people go in at one side, they come out on the other side all youthful. Okay, time to frolic. All right, so it's a nice painting. The closest thing there is in the human world to a Fountain of Youth is this low-fat vegan diet stuff, as well as, then that's the most powerful thing. But then the secondary benefits are all that stuff about, all the people in the major religions are healthier than non-religious people. Getting your exercise, managing your stress, getting your sleep, they all are major components. People tend to find those easier to do than adopting this diet. And just, sort of things that make you happy too. Enjoying time in nature, that's biophilia. Enjoying the beauty of a painting like this. This is Albert Bierstadt, Among the Sierra Nevada Mountains. I think it's the greatest landscape painting ever made. So those things, laughter, comedy, time with friends, all that stuff lowers our stress level, makes us happy. Having a sort of a stoic attitude towards life. I like the Marcus Aurelius attitude. He said, a man should be like a rocky cliff against which the waves break, but the cliff stands firm. Meaning there's always going to be some little BS every day, and don't take it too seriously. I like the Arthur Schopenhauer quote as well. He said, the best source of happiness comes from who the man is. A happy life is impossible. The highest a man can achieve is a heroic life. And what that basically means is if you have a purpose that you dedicate yourself to in your life and you stick to it and try to achieve your goals in that area, you will respect yourself because you did your best to do what was good, the best you could do. So when you respect yourself, then you're happy with yourself, then you're happy. And you can control that versus you can't control, I would be happy if only, something else that's out of your control. Helen Keller said something similar. Happiness comes from loyalty to a worthy purpose. And I somehow had an Ayn Rand quote thrown in here. Art is a concretization of metaphysics. That's true too. That's good art. So devote your life to a good purpose and you'll make it better. And then I got 20 commandments. I think this is the last slide of health. Don't eat meat. Don't eat dairy. I wrote it in the thou shalt not language of the Bible. No processed food or artificial sweeteners will mess up, increase your risk of diabetes. No fried foods, no oils, no caffeine. Don't put salad dressing on your salad. That's breaking the deal. Any oil, even a small amount, still increases your likelihood of becoming fat and sick. Only organic to avoid glyphosate, atrazine. Single ingredient food so they can't add things to it. Filter your water to get rid of all those estrogenics, fluoride, and aluminum. Try to eat low on the fat scale, Lentils have only 3% of calories from fat. Garbanzo's 13, so you're better off with lentils, okay? Try to minimize dietary protein. Like we said, like the James Mitchell work, for example. Try to exercise every day, at least a little bit. At least walk, okay? Figure out what you can work into your own routine and just try to keep moving to the extent you can. Chef AJ had emphasized eat the veggies at the beginning of the meal to stretch your stomach. That can help with weight loss. Thou shalt only eat starches, fruits, and veggies. These are the basic foods, and whole grains, whatever starches are included in there. Whole grains are included in starches. You'll eventually need B12. That's the only supplement I take is methylcobalamin B12. I don't take cyano because I don't want the cyano. You know what that means. Get your sleep, get your sunshine, manage your stress. That's basically it. Oh yeah, be like Adam and Eve, but keep your indoor heating and plumbing. So that's it. I hope that was helpful.
Sorry. There we are. I'm working on my little laptop here. That was terrific, Peter. Thank you very, very much for sharing all this information and these strategies. I find some people get super focused on nutrient density. Am I getting the best nutrients? Am I getting all the nutrients? It's just not important in my opinion. Eat according to calorie density, keep the calorie density low, and you'll be where you want to be both in your weight and your health as well. It's just automatic. Folks, if you got value from this video, please give it a like, leave a comment, and subscribe so you don't miss what we've got coming next. And remember, health isn't about perfection, it's about direction. Take the next right step and keep on going. We'll see you next week, next video. Thanks. Thanks, Peter.